Hey, what is going on, guys? In this video today, we're going to be going over the best linear and legacy sensitivity values for controller Fortnite players. Usually I only make one sensitivity video every few months, but when I uploaded the last one, which was towards the end of Season X, it was actually before linear became this hot new setting that a lot of controller players are using. And if you guys watched the video I made maybe a week or two ago, I looked at roughly 15 to 20 of the top controller Fortnite players, and literally 50% of them were on linear and 50% of them were on legacy, so it only makes sense to include both in this video. And if you're on exponential, I would definitely recommend switching to one of those two options. But speaking of looking at the top controller players, that's basically what I did to determine the quote-unquote best sensitivity values that you're gonna see. I looked at the 8 to 10 top players that were on linear, and then the 8 to 10 top players that were on legacy, checked their values, discarded any blatant outliers, and then kinda averaged everything out. I think that strategy/formula actually makes a lot of sense, and without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so let's start off with linear sensitivity here. Apparently, it's a really big struggle for players to find linear sensitivity values that they're comfortable with because it's so much different than legacy or exponential, so hopefully this can help with that. And even though technically build and edit sensitivity multipliers should go first, since those are the settings on top when you open the menu, we're going to save them for last and instead start with the look sensitivity section. As I was doing my research for this video, one of the things that surprised me the most was actually how similar almost all of the top players are when it comes to look horizontal and look vertical sensitivity. Pretty much everybody I checked had both their horizontal and vertical in the 45% to 50% range. Well, that is except for FaZe Sway. I think his was like 75-75, but obviously he's a mechanical demon, so I think trying to emulate him is probably not the smartest thing in the world. So I think a perfect average of what I saw is 47% horizontal and 47% vertical. And based on the legacy to new sensitivity conversion chart that apparently is pretty accurate, those values are roughly equivalent to about 6.5 X or Y on old settings. Another interesting thing I noticed is that pretty much every single top player uses the same number for both their horizontal and vertical. That's interesting because let's say you use something like 7x, 7y sensitivity on legacy. If you click the button to translate those values to the new sensitivity, the game will make it so that your horizontal and vertical numbers are very different, like 45 and 60. So a lot of people were kind of freaked out by that when the new settings first came out, but it seems like most of these top players don't think it's anything to worry about. Another thing I saw pretty much unanimously from the top players is that they had 0% for turning horizontal boost, turning vertical boost, and turning boost ramp time. This definitely makes sense because the higher your boosts are, the harder it's going to be for you to build muscle memory with your sensitivity. I did see one or two players using like 1% or 2% instead of just straight up 0, but that's probably just a small matter of preference. And for the final setting here, instant boost while building, I did see one or two people have it turned off, but the vast majority had it on, so that's definitely what we're gonna go with here. So that covers the look sensitivity section. Now let's move on to ADS sensitivity. I was pretty surprised to see that ADS sensitivity actually seemed to have a lot more variance than look sensitivity did. I think the lowest I saw was Lecce, who plays on 8% horizontal, 8% vertical, and then I saw some other guys who are much closer to 20% in both. However, what we're looking for in this video is more of an average, so I think 12% for both horizontal and vertical is a good compromise. Now, much like we saw in the look sensitivity section, pretty much every single player used 0 for the horizontal and vertical boost, as well as the turning boost ramp time. Next up is the advanced sensitivity section. Now, most of the things in here aren't important. We've already determined that we're going to be using a linear input curve, and you obviously want aim assist on 100% at all times. So all that's left to be determined here is look dampening time. And much like we've seen with all the other boosts in this video, pretty much all these top players are using a 0.00 look dampening time. This is something that's going to feel incredibly weird at first if you've either just never used linear before, or you've used linear but with something like the default 0.2 second dampening time. But as time goes on, you will adjust eventually, and clearly the top level players seem to think a 0 look dampening time is definitely the way to go. The final section here is the build mode and edit mode sensitivity multipliers. Again, there was a fairly wide range of values used by the linear players I looked at, but I didn't really see anyone lower than around 1.6 or higher than 2.5. So I think a solid middle point here is 1.9 for both build and edit. Now, as I always like to say about these sensitivity values, and honestly it kind of fits for all the sensitivity values, is that if you're on console, you may want to go a tad bit lower than what I showcased. Since pretty much every single top linear player I looked at plays controller on PC, they're going to be getting much higher FPS than an average console player will. And it just logically makes sense that lower FPS means that it's slightly harder to control higher sensitivity values. So now that we've covered linear settings, let's move on to Legacy. And again, I just want to clarify that even though I play on Legacy, these aren't going to be my personal sensitivity values. They're an average of the best Legacy player sensitivities. So starting with X and Y sensitivity here, you'll pretty much find that all good Legacy players are in the 6 to 7.5 range with these two values, and that's actually the way it's been for a while now. So based on what I saw from the top Legacy players, I think that a solid average is roughly 6.75 for both X and Y sensitivity. Unlike with the linear sensitivity values, you'll see some people using like 6x, 6.5 wide where they aren't the same value, and that's actually something I've always done, but it does seem like more people have X and Y the same compared to different, so that's what we're gonna go for here. For targeting and scope sensitivity, again, you'll see a pretty wide range of values from maybe 0.25 to 0.5, and a lot of that depends on what you choose for your X and Y values. Basically, the higher your X and Y is, the lower your targeting and scoped is going to be. For example, a guy like Jarvis, who plays on almost 7.5 X and Y, has a targeting and scoped of roughly 0.31, while a guy like Upshaw, who plays 6X, 6Y, is going to be much higher than that. Now, since we chose 6.75 for X and Y, which is kinda right in the middle, a targeting and scope sensitivity of 0.375 seems to fit pretty much perfectly with that. The final two sensitivities in the Legacy section are your editing and building sensitivity multipliers. And unlike how there was a lot of variety with most of the other sensitivity values here, editing and building were pretty straightforward. Almost every single player had it maxed all the way out at 2.0. And even the players who didn't have both maxed would be using something like 2.0 building, 1.9 editing, or 1.9 building, 1.8 editing, and even those cases seem to be kinda rare. However, I want to give the same disclaimer here that I did in the linear section. If you play on console, you may want to turn down your building and editing sensitivity a bit, and maybe even some of the other sensitivity values that we covered. The top legacy players that these sensitivity values are based on all play on PC, and therefore probably get roughly 200 to 300 frames per second while playing Fortnite. On console, you're probably going to get 40 to 60 FPS on average, so it's going to be a tad bit harder for you to control your sensitivity. And one of the easiest ways to counter that is just to turn it down a bit. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you watched the entire thing, be sure to let me know with a comment down the comment section below. Are you currently using linear or legacy sensitivity and settings? I know this definitely isn't the first time I've asked that, but I always like getting updated to see how the community is changing. Be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications, do whatever the heck you want, and I will catch you guys next time.